Hello and welcome to the Cash News Podcast, your go-to source for informative conversations about all things cash and currency. From cash security and payments technology to the cash supply chain, we're here to share insights on the issues shaping the world of cash today. Join your hosts, Tom Meehan, Shaun Ferrari, and Brad Moody as they dive into the latest trends, strategies, and technology. This is the Cash News Podcast. Now, here's Tom, Shaun, and Brad.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Cash News Podcast. I'm joined, as always, with our good other co-host, Shaun Ferrari, and Mr. Tom Meehan. Gentlemen, please say hello.
Hello. Hello.
You follow directions well. Thanks, all. I hope you've all had a good week, and as you're getting ready for your Labor Day weekend to soon come out, I appreciate it. We've got some exciting topics that we haven't rehearsed or haven't really talked about, and we thought now is a good time to start. So, Tom, what's on your mind? You're on the hook.
I think we're going to talk a little bit about stablecoin today, and that might be the whole conversation. So for anybody that's listening that wants to get in and talk about it, because, Brad, actually, you were part of this once too. We generally get into the digital asset space, and sometimes we're the guys that are going like, haha, we told you.
Yeah.
Haha. I think we were together, actually. I don't know if it was San Diego, and it was like after it was maybe 2 years ago, and there was like this massive event, and the three of us were like, yeah, we kind of predicted that. It might have been when like Block 5 filed, and everybody was like, hey, we want our money back. Like, where are our billions of dollars that we gave you? So talk about that. I know Shaun is concerned about competing podcasts and how we're going to stay relevant in this time.
I am. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to be offended if anyone out there today would rather spend their time listening to 2 hours of Taylor Swift and the Kelsey brothers on their podcast. We can't really compete with that. I mean, we do have Brad. But I don't know, Brad. I wouldn't be offended if people chose to go listen to a couple hours of that. I mean, she has a new album coming out. It's a whole thing.
But the thing is that she may be generational, but I'm inspirational. So I can show you my interpretive dancing that really would change your life. Not for the better, but it would definitely change your life. So we're definitely competing with the Kelsey brothers.
Yeah. Well, we'll get T-shirts made up. I like the "I'm inspirational" type quote. We could do that. We could put some of that on the back of our T-shirts for the Cash News Podcast. We'll put something out to compete with the new Swift album. But anyway, we digress. We would like to get Taylor on at some point, though. So Taylor, if you're listening, feel free to come on, and we'd love to know about your payments habits, cash, coin, stable coin. What do you use? How do you transact? Be curious. Anyway.
Yeah. So lots going on in the digital space. I mean, I don't want to get into the political side of it, but there's, some bills and rules that we're talking about, which feels like we're deregulating, not regulating. I don't know. It feels like we might not be going the way that I thought we would, but it is a good thing that we're actually talking about it. And I think at a certain point, there were folks that were on the bandwagon of that, this is not here to stay. I think we at this point know that crypto is definitely at this point probably not going anywhere. Whether or not it's hit the ceiling and all of those things are different. I know that we never really talked about, and we probably should have a whole conversation about Ripple and XRP winning the lawsuit and going against the SEC and really challenging the government. And what I would say you would not anticipate would have ended the way it did, where the XRP is back available. But we'll save that for another episode. That's a good topic to talk about, and I'm sure we could probably get a guest on for that. But let's just talk about stablecoin and some of the stuff that's going on. I know, Shaun, you and I were chatting about the fines and some of the things that are occurring.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think one of the most interesting things this past week that I saw, and I didn't see it get a whole bunch of news play, so I'm a little curious as to why, and maybe I missed it. I mean, there's no shortage of news going on these days, so it could have just been buried in the news cycle that I missed. I'm not sure, but anyway, on August 7th, the New York State Department of Financial Services put a consent order out on Paxos and a fine of $26.5 million, basically for a failure to conduct sufficient due diligence of its former partner Binance, and a systemic failure in Paxos's anti-money laundering program. So, the long and short of it is, New York State's DFS, looked at it, did a review of what was going on, and basically found that there wasn't an effective monitoring program at all in place for KYC or customer due diligence at Paxos, which is interesting because I've talked to several people at Paxos over the past few years, and they were quite proud of the job they were doing in that space. And I don't know, I didn't look at what DFS found. I didn't, I'm not an examiner to do that. And I'm not saying what they were doing wasn't good, although New York State sure is saying that. So I think, it's one of those things where when you're dealing with all these transactions and they're all digital, moving quickly, I have sympathy for folks that are trying to do KYC and AML on it. It can't be easy.
It's not like Singapore, right? When Singapore adopted it and regulated it very early on, and Paxos has done a good job of trying to mirror that. So when there's no rules and you do the right thing, and all of a sudden a rule pops up, it's interesting, right?
Yeah, I know it's it's statements, and I know these consent orders get written in certain ways for various reasons, but statements like, Paxos's deficient transaction monitoring system also prevented the company from detecting obvious patterns of money laundering, thus exacerbating its onboarding compliance deficiencies. I mean, it doesn't make it sound as though they were hard to find.
Yeah,
but
convenient, I think, is what they call that, right?
Yeah.
So here's my take on it. I think that, for AML specifically, if you're in a bank, there's very, very, very defined rules on what needs a specific a SAR, what needs to be flagged, what needs to be filled out. And I'm not sure in crypto they're as defined. And I guess crypto changes every day. So if I do a transaction that was $10,000 on a Monday and it goes up 50%, do I have to do something different? By design, there's a lot of nuances in AML, and I used to do a lot with AML, so I feel very comfortable talking about this, in the sense of you have to follow it to a T, and you still can get challenged. You still can get challenged. So there are a lot of safeguards. I don't know what they are or they're not doing, but if there's not clear regulation, of what is required. So are they just doing every transaction for $10,000? Are they, how are they managing it? How are they managing the anonymity of it? What happens if you're transferring coin? What happens if there's an extreme rise? I think there's a lot of things there. Probably didn't get a lot of news because it isn't a lot of dollars when you break it down. Yeah. Also, I think it's a niche audience, right? Like with everything going on. But it does lead to what we always talk about is we're still in this infancy zone where that's why you can make so much money because it's so new. But there are unknown risks that haven't been, there's not case law, there's not things in place.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, when we talk about will stablecoins, or at what point will they become operated by and formed by the mainstream financial institutions. And I think the risks in this particular case show that even though there's work going on in that space and some are trying different things, there's still a lot of risk out there, and banks do not like this risk. I mean, It's not that Paxos loves it, but if you're a JP Morgan,
but they invest
sure. Sure. But investing it and operating it are two different animals, right?
That value, right?
But I think that's that's the struggle with this. I mean, even when you look at, again, some of the other stuff going on in this case with Paxos and the consent order, right? It's some of it has to do with geofencing restrictions, where it enabled U.S. users to access unregulated exchanges because the geofencing didn't say, oh, no, you're in the U.S. I'm not letting you access this exchange.
Yeah, but eToro's done that successfully, right?
Sure. And, yeah, there are ways to do it in theory.
It's so I wonder, and this is just completely speculative, is if you are a digital asset person that is involved heavily in tech, you're going to have a much higher degree of sophistication to not be seen than if you're a traditional banker.
Yeah,
sure. And so I don't think it's treated equally. Like if I don't want you to know where I am, you are not going to know. You're just not, like, but I would argue that has to do with what I did my whole life. So you have to have different safeguards and different things put in place as a digital provider. I think this is where Coinbase really did a good job when they were challenging the government, is they're like, hey, we're doing more than anybody who's ever done or ever will do because we believe this is real. So they spent billions of dollars to prove out that we're doing it the right way. Where did Paxos, where did the other guys go? They all left the U.S. Instead of building it around. They all ran.
But also, you also have to support, but all at the same time argue. It's not like they haven't been engaging, right? So, Paxos, following Ripple and Circle, trying to register as a national registry to get a federal banking license. So, at that same point, they're trying to follow. They're doing what they can. Like, hey, I want to comply. I want to be ahead of the game. I want to be part of the solution. So at the same time, I'm curious if that OCC regulation portion of it, if that opened up them to a little deeper investigation, and then maybe that dirty. I'm not just saying them, but maybe could have caused the ripple. Get it?
I don't
ripple?
disagree, actually, and I would argue that there's some regulatory folks, and again, my opinion.
Yeah, right.
Their job is to find things, right? That's what they're there to do. You cannot not find things forever. And, you might have just got caught up in a different investigation. I think, to your point, there's, Brad, much more folks trying to do it the right way, which involves a lot more looking under the covers. So I don't think there is any malice or hidden intent, where there are other exchanges and other brokers, like, depends what you want to call them, right? Other, that created their business around, we're not even going to try to do this in the US, which opens up all sorts of other issues. And there were like BlockFi, and I was involved in BlockFi. What was the other one? It was BlockFi, and there were two that just went upside down. And billions of dollars were lost, and everybody went, hey, and it was like, these are US companies that are operating outside the US that are literally building their business to stay outside of the lines. And one of the things I always say is, like, if you have an appetite for risk, and you definitely can make a lot of money, but like, your appetite for risk has to be pretty extreme when you're operating with a company that is holding billions of your dollars outside the US in a digital asset that you have no recourse, to bite. And that's where I don't think that was the case with them. But this leads me to a different conversation, because I think there's a lot of talk about stablecoin, and Shaun and I are both, and Brad, we've all talked about this. I always worry that there's still definition creep on, like, what is actually stablecoin versus what people perceive it as. But just this week or last week, there was, and this got a lot of attention, but I don't think it got front page attention. So, like, Reuters, stablecoin fuels liquidity, not yet money. And when you read about it, what it really was is there's around $250 billion of stablecoin that we'll say out loud is backed by some sort of U.S. entity, the way it's written today. There's still probably some algorithmic coin out there, which we talked about too. But, like, you had this $252 billion, and, not in the scheme of the U.S., not a huge number, but between January 1st and the end of June 2025, there were 344 instances that caused a loss of $2.5 billion of that. So I'm not that good at math, but roughly 10%, right? Like, or roughly 1%. Like, when you think about it, 1% of the total amount went away. And 1% is a lot when you start to when it gets to trillions of dollars. 1% of it is a lot in 6 months of what you would think was supposed to be safe.
And that goes into the question of the key word of that, you said liquidity, right? So
yeah,
the question that I have about everything is if it's not an asset banked or supposed to be asset backed, right? What creates that volatility that decreased the value of it more so than anything else that created the effect? That what you're supposed to hold in reserves in order to do blah blah blah, right? And it's interesting in such a unstable market of crypto. We've all seen how it rises and collapses and the strong survive. But I'm curious if there's what influence changed this. Like I'm curious, like what lost the tangible asset? What became fungible?
So for this particular example, the stable coin, let's just say it's backed by the US dollar, right? Like I'm just saying, let's say that. So this is in theory a digitized form of a stable, whether it be a treasury or this, so that it follows a market condition. It's important to note that in those 344 incidents were security incidents. They were not flaws in this wasn't a bank run. This was protocol exploits, phishing attacks, wallet compromises, key compromises, pool manipulation, rug pulls and exit scams. So this is what, like Shaun and I talked about with you back in San Diego, is that forget about the newness and lack of regulation. This is vulnerabilities that exist that, we equate to like check fraud still happens at a remarkably high rate, right? Comparatively. Yeah. But we have decades of experience to mitigate as much as we probably can, right? Like from an electronic standpoint, real-time payments fraud is much, much harder to complete today than it was before. You almost need a human in the mix, right? You don't hear of a lot of exploits or vulnerabilities in ACH. You hear of attacks on social engineering. You hear of people giving up their passwords or changing a wire. In this case, you're talking about bugs and vulnerabilities, or issues, flash loans and attacks, on certain things. Phishing attacks. Look, phishing attacks are just migrating over to the new thing, right? Like that's all that is.
How many fraud events have I had to do on these exact type of things where I've had to do an investigation where it comes down to a human doing something that they shouldn't have done? Always.
So I don't have the data. I would love to understand the data of out of those 344 instances, how many of them were really human-driven errors. I wish I did.
350.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, but I will say that this goes back to the understanding of like stolen private keys, poor key management. That's education. That's people, human-driven. Rug pulls and exit scams are social engineering, like pool manipulation. I'm not expert enough to talk about it. That kind of feels like someone, not understanding. But at the end of the day, it goes back to what we always say is be educated. Like do your research before you put your money into something. I'm not anti, like I have my money in all sorts of things, but understand what your risks are, what the vulnerabilities are, and how it works. So Shaun, I know you keep hearing about stablecoin. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the risks are still there. I think some of the interesting things you mentioned in the Reuters article, I think some of the things in there is a really interesting article on it, and I think explains a little bit about, you mentioned the liquidity aspects, but when you look at how stablecoins are actually used, right? Like somewhere close to 90% of them, of the value, are actually used to just facilitate crypto trading, right? So it's essentially they're all being used to move between different cryptos in a market, right? So you need to go from one to the other. You can't buy one directly with the other. They're not interoperable, that whole thing. They're not fungible. So you convert out of one crypto to a USDC or whatever stablecoin you're using, and then into another crypto. Well, if you're worried about I mean, that is basically an instantaneous creation and burning of a of a stable coin. So yeah, it might have to be backed, but it's backed by a treasury or whatever for a fleeting second as it's moving from one thing to another. So it's not like, and that's 90%. So, that's a lot of value that you're not really, it's not liquidity like we think of liquidity, like, oh, I can take a credit loan out on that, or a bank is holding that. So I can, it's very different liquidity. It's just,
it's not their money, right? The other thing is it's an exchange, so it's not their money. So I'm not calling out Paxos specifically, but it's different.
Yeah, it's different. I think the other thing is, so there's that aspect, and then the other thing is we keep talking about it like, at someday, will it be large enough in holdings to matter? Potentially. Yes. It's growing.
It's not big enough now.
But right now, it's I think the thing in routers had it around 20th in terms of who different countries that are holders of U.S. treasuries. And I guess you could say, okay, well, it's 18th on the list of countries. That somewhat impressive that stablecoin is equivalent to a country, but it's also equivalent to Norway as a country in terms of holding U.S. treasuries, right? So it's
so I always say that there is some level of a lot of what we're talking about today is insignificant, right? Like it is a little bit of a challenge when you don't get the press, you don't get the education, and it is kind of separate. I mean, I don't want to get too far into it because I think we should save it, but like some of the things that are happening today on the Hill with the Genius Act are going to put safeguards in for stablecoin specifically. No, they're trying stablecoin specifically, not traditional Bitcoin, but the idea of stablecoin is like, if you're going to back it with the US dollar, then it needs to be protected by like the US dollar.
Yeah.
In theory.
No, and I think like it or not like it, as policy, I think some of the benefit, and what I've heard, again, folks that may or may not like the policies that are in the Genius Act are at least appreciative that there are policies and regulations in the act, so you can at least have some guardrails and know what you're doing.
I totally agree.
So that I think is I think some some other countries have taken most other countries haven't gone as far as that yet, and are looking to see how the Genius Act gets applied and what the exact regulations are that come out around it and so forth. But I think you can't argue with the fact. I guess you can argue with anything, but I think it's pretty widely understood that the Genius Act and the regulatory regime that gets created as a result of it will be looked at from all countries around the world in terms of what can we do, what should we do, how is the U.S. doing it.
Do you guys tend to agree that the first one that does it wins, or do you think or is it going to be who has the biggest hammer, or to create the regulation, to really create the rules and standards?
I think, and again, I don't mean this to sound. I don't want to sound U.S.
right, and that's
flag waving U.S. centric, but because the U.S. is the first one in this case to come out with it, we're gonna win. But I think that's a combination of being one of the first and being the U.S. and that's what's going on. But I think if the Euro came out with it first, maybe, I mean,
but how do you get that many countries to agree, right? That's the problem. I think that's why we probably as a country, have a very unique perception with it, because of all the foreign currency it's held, all the U.S. currency is held foreign, right? I would think from the physical note perspective, a lot of that could be coming back in the form of crypto. Just again, my opinion, but it is still backed by the U.S. dollar when you look at the translation of money. So it's an interesting question, I think.
Yeah,
and who knows what's going to happen?
I also think that it's important for everybody, because I do know that as many times as we've spoke about this together, as Shaun and I spoke about it, is there is still this perception of a CDBC is the same as stablecoin, is the same as Bitcoin, is the same as this. And the Genius Act, whether you agree with it or not, is really specific, unless I'm wrong, around stablecoin. It's not including other things. And I don't have an opinion because I read it and I'm kind of like, this is we're in this, what's politics and what's not. I do think largely, and I sound like a flag waver when I say this, we set the economic tone for the world. Like we do. We and so like, my favorite, and Shaun and I were together. I don't know where we were. We might have been in Mexico City. There was someone on stage talking and from an African country about how they did this, they did that, they did this, and it's amazing. And I'm like, you forced a country the size of Rhode Island to do something. Like we couldn't. It's not a good experiment to say, could you do this in the U.S.? And then there was someone from Venezuela was going, oh, we're building the Bitcoin city. We're doing this. We're doing that. And I'm going like, not a good example. Like it's not a good way to say even if we wanted to emulate that, even if we wanted to as a government, it is a monumental task to do any of these things. And stablecoin, again, this, like, think back to what we said. Who cares about $250 billion? Like really, at the end of the day, like when you're talking about global, now, that could be the GDP of a ton of countries, right. But those are the same countries that when say like we gave a digital wallet to everybody, we forced everybody to use it, they have no choice. It's going like, yeah, you also don't have clean water to drink. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but like, you can't do that in a developed country.
I argue to the extent that who cares about 250 billion? Obviously, me personally, that would hurt my net worth, right? But the one side of that is, let's just factor in, let's just say that one extreme billionaire was invested in that, or a bank was heavily invested in that, and now when you look at it from an impact from an individual, society compared to a person or a group of people in a conglomerate or an investment hedge fund or something like that, then you're looking at what kind of steps and process were, what AML and KYC things were left up. And, I don't know if you've practiced, but I've done it, open up a checking account, and I can open up a checking account, immediately invest in that, and no one's checked my ID. I've just answered 5 or 6 questions, and I have an account number, right? So, without that regulation and process in place, how easy would it be to do under that AML $10,000 limit to make this happen systematically? Meaning it's happening, and no one's aware, right? So, that adds up quick. I think of Office Space, the movie, right? Oh, you're just rounding a cent off or half a cent. And also, was that due over the course of a day? It just, again, me being me, conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I do think, though, that, and again, I can see that some of the bankruptcy things in the Genius Acts are challenging for some folks, but it does follow the Security Exchange, like it does follow the Banking Security Act. Like, I mean, it does say, so no gray at all. Like, this is what you need to do. So I do believe banks will be able to manage the AML portion of this because it's very, very clearly stated. Yeah. And essentially, I know I when I say this, Shaun, like if you're digitizing $1, like you're not that far off from giving someone a debit card or real-time payment transaction.
And I think that's what's interesting, and that's bringing it back around to where we started with the Paxos discussion, is in order to implement those BSA procedures and to put stablecoin aside for a second, but to run that on your current digital systems, your ACH systems and so forth, right? It adds cost, quite a bit of it. Sure. It adds time, quite a bit of it, to give us the current financial system. And now, where stablecoins have been able to show they can speed that up is in kind of that instant liquidity thing that we were just talking about, but I can move money from here to whatever country I want almost instantaneously. because the belief was in the background there was some sort of faster, better AML, KYC, instantaneous check, something that happened before, something that's going on out there. And I think, to me, and yes, it was small dollars and it was, maybe not that huge a thing with the Paxos thing, but does it start to say, oh, actually, if you start following the Genius Act stuff and the BSA requirements, and depending on how the regulators interpret all that stuff and how they apply it to stablecoins, do you eventually bring that to a level of cost and speed slowdown that more equates it to the current digital financial system, just because it takes time to do some checks?
Yeah. and you hit on a key point that I think is I didn't mention, and I in the back of my head is always there, but I don't know why I don't say it out loud, is it's really, really expensive to manage AML. You've got to hire people. You got to have systems in place. It's very, very expensive for financial institutions to actually do the work, because the more transactions, the more potential for things to occur.
Right. Noise and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting. But my last comment is we'll see where this leads on the crypto side, because I've said now since as long as I can remember, I think crypto is here to stay. There has to be tighter rails around it from a regulatory standpoint, because the reason criminals use crypto, the reason they do is not, everybody says the anonymity. It's not. It's because the speed of which it moves. Like, right. I can give you a suitcase full of money that's more anonymous than crypto would be any day of the week, because your digital trail doesn't go away. You have to eventually convert that to cash somewhere to use it. And if you follow it, you can. And the proof is when Colonial Pipeline and the beef hack, when they did the ransomware, the FBI was able to recover that money because they followed the digital trail. And people are like, oh, it's impossible. It's not. They put the time behind to say, eventually you want to turn it to dollars. So I'm going to find you. Eventually you're going to transfer it to something that leads to a human being, or you can't use it. Where if I give you a suitcase of money, unless I photocopied the serial numbers, not as easy. It's more anonymous cash. So I actually think the bad guys use crypto because it's easy. It's fast. It's just fast. Like, I can transfer this money 45 times. In the old days, I gotta have a guy drop off a suitcase to Brad. Brad's got to break that up, drop off 2 suitcases to Shaun. Shaun's going to give it to his kids on his bike to drop it off in a backpack to Tom. Where crypto,
and I'm busy on Tuesday now, so I'm not doing that. Right? But the one thing about that you have to just kind of think about, in process, is who's, the compliance, and going back to the companies, they all have compliance groups. They have people that are head of compliance, because as a crypto exchange, it works. They're also investing in other people's money, right? So they have to do that checks and balances with the people. So it exists. It's not like it's being done negligently. So the argument I have is, as you said, what has happened systematically to make this available? And I think that's where discovery from the U.S. government is going to be very important at this point, to identify what's happened. Because if it's a fine issue, meaning FINE is change, fine you money, then is this going to be a witch hunt to all the cryptos to make one crypto more favorable than the other? Again, my conspiracy theory, Ed. So, but I'm right.
Yeah,
I think you might be right. Maybe. All right. Any last parting words? Where are we going to see each other? Aren't we all together at some point? I think we're somewhere.
Well, we've got the Payments Coalition dinner, which we're looking forward to in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure if Shaun, I don't know if you're coming to that, but
yeah, I plan to. Yeah, so we have that. We've got Miami will be I think maybe one of the next big conferences we'll be at together.
When is the date? When is the date?
SCTA. So the Miami one is the first week in November, 3rd through 5th.
Okay, and SCTA is coming up pretty quick, right?
Yeah, October 1st, yeah.
SCTA is beginning of October, yeah.
Yep. So we're going to get together twice. Oh my, we're going to be together three times in a 60-day period. Oof, That's not good. That's not good.
Look out.
Yeah.
Buy some crypto.
Get your digital wallets ready.
Yeah, exactly. And click on the link
leave it on the
and
table.
just copy your wallet over. Click
I'll
on your link.
I'll leave it on the table on a thumb drive with it cryptocurrency written on top of it.
In the bathroom. In the bathroom, we'll leave that. Yes, that's a good reminder. Don't plug flash drives in that you find. I happen to be in a corporate facility. This is like a real story, that happened in like within the last 3 weeks. I was in a corporate facility using the restroom, and on the paper towel holder there was a flash drive that said confidential. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is amazing. I should have took a picture of it. And then I was like, oh, I just want to plug it in to see what kind of malware is on it. So bad.
When I used to do intrusion stuff, we used to leave those out in different places and put a camera on it to see who grabbed it and say, hey, that person did it.
And what I did is I picked it up and I smashed it and then threw it in the garbage because I was like, but I wanted to plug it in to see what it was on it because I knew it was malware. But like that's a real thing. So don't plug flash drives in. Don't do it.
Yeah. It could have also been the keys though to like a crypto.
Yes, it could have. It very well could have.
Hundreds of billions of dollars.
And this is why there were 344 instances.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that person's like, what if it really is someone's crypto wallet? So yeah, awesome. Well. Thank you for everybody listening to the banter. We're going to see each other, so we'll actually probably get to do some live ones. Live ones are always more fun. I'm looking forward to seeing you all. We're wrapping up the summer. And like and subscribe and find out. We're not hard to find. We'd love for guests. If you're listening and you know someone that would come on, and you don't need to be an expert to be on. Like we want to have banter. Like we'd love to have someone just talk about like I use coin because I use coin. This is why I think stablecoin is important. I mean, I don't want to get in a tangent, but we might have had some people join many times that weren't necessarily fans of what we said, and it made it fun. So you're welcome to join. Like and subscribe. Really important to subscribe. It's interesting how many people say they watch and or listen, but don't subscribe, which helps get the word out. So,
yep, absolutely.
Good to see you both.
Yeah.
Hey, great to see you. Thank you all.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Cash News Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful. Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and be sure to visit us at thecashnews.com to stay up to date with the latest on the world of cash. Thanks again for listening to the Cash News Podcast.